Good evening. I'm Joel Fetterman, Chair of the Transformative Social Change Department at Saybrook, and I'm honored tonight to introduce Dr. Marc Pilisuk for this evening's presentation on lessons learned from a lifetime of activism. Before coming to Saybrook, Marc was a professor at UC Berkeley and UC Davis for many years. He has mentored countless students and faculty, including myself. He's earned too many achievement awards from major national and international scholarly and professional organizations for us to mention here. At Saybrook, he's the progenitor and co-founder of the field of transformative social change. Marc's activism spans the course of modern history. He was one of the founders of the first teach-ins against the war in Vietnam, participated in the Berkeley free speech movement, and has been leading voice in peace, human rights, and social equity movements throughout his life, right up to the present moment. At 80 years of age, he literally stood on the barricades and spoke at the occupation of the port of Oakland to place the issue of social and economic justice on the national agenda where it is now. Marc's relationship with his wife Phyllis, who passed away earlier this year, is also a model for all of us of what it means to be a true partner in life, who gives every ounce of his energy to the care and happiness of his beloved. Marc's life has been a hero's journey, and he's lived his hero's journey not only as an individual, but also as part of our collective hero's journey, to build what he has called the healing web of community, a web that extends outward to all of humanity. Before I bring up Marc, I'd like to introduce Saybrook President Nathan Long, who would like to make an announcement.
So I've seen and been inspired by many of these students who read off your phone, so I'm going to do that too. It is a real pleasure to be here tonight, and I want to thank all of you for coming to this presentation. Back in February, March, Dr. Pilisuk and I tried to work out a time for us to come together to meet, and it was right after the time his wife Phyllis had passed away. We were still in Oakland and wanted to celebrate the passing, or Marc's wife and her passing, and honor her lifetime of service and his love for her, and also to acknowledge Marc for all of his many years of service to Saybrook University, as well as to higher education in general. And one of the most important things I think we try to do and continue to do here at Saybrook is honor those who have done those things that contribute most to social change and social justice. So in our conversation, I had brought up with Marc the prospect of, would you be interested in furthering your legacy, not just into the future, but even now, because there's so many people inspired by the work that he does and that so many of our faculty, so many of you are doing and about to do in your research. And he said, well, tell me more about it, and then we'll go. So we batted around a few versions, and I'm proud to announce tonight, and I'm going to need your help with this. So this isn't just an announcement, this is a community effort. I am pleased to announce tonight the beginning of the Dr. Marc Pilisuk Transformative Social Change and Leadership Scholarship. Let me describe this for you. The Transformative Social Change and Leadership Scholarship is created to honor the current life and legacy and work of Dr. Marc Pilisuk, whose research and experience has led to significant advancement in the areas of peace and social justice. His work is aligned with the work of other countless Saybrook students and faculty across multiple disciplines, inspiring and promoting positive social change in organizations and communities around the country and the world. The criteria will be that beginning soon, hopefully, there will be 2 scholarships issued at least once per year, depending on how sizable we can get this, to 1 new and 1 continuing student, and perhaps more. and the individuals receiving this scholarship will have to meet the criteria that all of you meet. A deep passion and commitment to humanistic values as evidenced through their work as scholars and/or practitioners. A dedication as evidenced by their academic or on-ground work for promoting peace and social justice. Demonstrated academic capabilities such that they evidence the capacity for graduate study and a completed philosophy statement. I won't get into all the details around that. And then they must be, of course, pursuing a discipline at Saybrook with a strong focus in humanistic principles and social change. So we'll be able to start issuing these scholarship awards beginning when the fund hits $25,000. Now, Dr. Richards here said, $25,000? How will we ever get it there, right? And I said, well, what's interesting is the first president of Saybrook University, Dr. Eleanor Criswell, we just started that a few months back, and it's already halfway there. And so, given all of your love for Dr. Pilisuk, given your love for Dr. Pilisuk, humanistic study, transformative social change, and the work that you're all doing and that he has been leading, I'm going to ask for your help. I know you're all paying tuition right now, so I'm not going to sit here and pass the hat around. But if you know people who are interested in advancing this work, and if you want to throw in a couple shekels, there's easy ways to give. We're going to announce this in the President's Update coming up here in September. Send that out to your friends. Get people to give, because what we want to do is provide opportunities to yourselves and future scholars who can really help advance Dr. Pilisuk's legacy. So with that, I'll stop talking, but I wanted to make sure we got that announcement tonight. It's a special evening, and really glad to be here with you, Mark. So thank you, sir.
Thank you, Nathan. I know it's a late start. Almost everything that I do is late. I was once introduced at a podium as the late Dr. Pilisuk. I think that I'm still kicking, and I wanted to ask people here, how many of you have experienced deep trauma or know somebody or worked with somebody who's experienced deep trauma? Okay? And how many of you have fears about the future? I think there are two types of people involved. There are those who have experienced deep trauma and have a great fear about the future. And there are those whom you don't know very well. I think we're in for a big challenge, and I wish I had answers to give you. And I'm going to have to apologize because I'm going to read some of this because I tend to forget things, and when you forget things, I mean, sometimes it's serious. There are two women in a car, and the driver went through two stop signs and was coming to a red light with a big intersection, and the passenger said, "Mildred, I don't want to upset you. You just went through two stop signs. We're coming to another intersection." He says, "Oh shit, was I driving?" This is definitely a moment for gratitude for the opportunity to come to Saybrook RC. I've been doing that since 1994. It's been quite a ride. Saybrook was remarkable in helping students nurture both their creative selves and the application of their graduate work. to changing the lives of people in society. My job was to help students deal with some very dangerous realities and find ways to take on some of the problems facing humankind and to find ways to make a difference while getting a degree. What lessons I got from the students? Amazing number. How to incede in human trafficking. How to apply indigenous peace caravans to end warfare when Western methods had failed. How to hear the silent voices of oppressed Palestinians. I've always been a source of despair for my students, reminding them about how deep are the problems they chose. My students, in return, have always been a source of hope for me in the amazing courage and significance of their projects. It might be easy to get the wrong message from what I say. This, as a teacher, this often happens. You really have to be careful about this. There was a teacher in a kindergarten class who was lecturing to her students about the evils of Coca-Cola. And she told them that it rots your gut, it ruins your teeth, and the kids weren't paying any attention. So she brought a creative experiment. She dug up a big night crawler, brought it to the class, along with a Coke. She had everybody's attention when she dropped the squirming worm into the bottle, resealed the cap, let it stand for a week. Then she opened the Coke, poured the contents through a strainer. Success, no worm. What does that teach us about Coca-Cola and your health? First answer, if you got worms, drink Coca-Cola. What I have to say tonight could be quite a downer, but I want you to listen for a different message about your own capacities to deal with unspeakable threats to the human condition. I used to be the first one at the RCs to be on the volleyball court, on the dance floor, and in the pool. I've changed with a bunch of disabling and life-threatening illnesses and some serious losses. It's a good time to take stock of what may be a lesson from my experience. In my recent years, I stayed alive to be a caregiver for my wife, Phyllis, and to contribute toward the momentous changes to make life on our planet a safe and nourishing place for its residents. I fear that I, and in fact all of us, are running out of time. There's a Snoopy cartoon that reminds us of an overly used human capacity. There is no problem so big or dangerous that it cannot be run away from. So try this problem on. On several occasions, we have barely escaped a sudden end to all life following the blast, firestorm, and radiation effects of nuclear weapons. Now, they are objects of unlimited expansion and of an unraveling of the agreements that help to prevent their use. On an ordinary day, the earth warms, increasingly devastating fires, floods, desertification of arable lands, water contamination all occur, and one child dies every 3 seconds from malnutrition or a preventable or curable illness. These are not accidents. They are the consequences of a system that we humans have created. So this is a time to reflect on what I might have to pass on in the world, and I thank Sabre for giving me this chance. Certainly had my share of what I considered great ideas about the perception of the self, the theory of rational choice, alternative healing, the analysis of networks, the root causes of violence, racism, and the culture of poverty. These are all gathered in endless articles, research reports, and books, topped off with a long list of state and national awards for teaching, for research, for service to the community. And as these gather dust, I realize that they do not mean much. What matters is that we humans are moving toward a world of violent destruction of every person, every living thing we hold dear, while we distract ourselves with the search for individual growth, escape, and comfort. Science and technology have not provided the answer. In fact, they often enhance the danger, even while they produce some good solutions that do not get applied. So from science, we turn to stories. I'll share some of my own. I hope that sharing this may provide insights for the current group of scholar practitioners who are still searching for a way this fragile experiment of life on the planet might continue. I went to college during the McCarthy era. I saw some faculty dismissed for failing to sign a loyalty oath. I watched a black disabled Korean War veteran get thrown off a bus, and no one dared to complain. We could not get students to sign the Bill of Rights. It just seemed that it wouldn't do any good, and you might get in trouble. I knew the world around me was an unjust and sometimes violent place, but since nothing could be done to change it, I became a psychologist with the hope that I could at least help people adjust to it. Then the 60s happened. I worked with Tom Hayden and the Students for a Democratic Society and became an active supporter of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. When the war in Vietnam began to escalate, I joined with a group intending to close down the University of Michigan for its failure to teach about a deepening crisis and the lies that were being used to support American intervention. What actually culminated was the first teach-in, and then the teach-in movement, and then the anti-war efforts of soldiers and veterans, all leading eventually to an end to that war. But not until 68,000 American soldiers had been killed while in the task of killing 2 million Vietnamese. My activism on that issue brought me into the office of the director of my research institute, who warned me that I might be causing the institute to lose some grant money. I had the audacity and perhaps the stupidity to respond that I thought the Mental Health Research Institute stood for something more important than the dollars it could bring in. I went on to teach at other major universities. I continued to see the punishments for taking risks. At Purdue University, I debated with the head of the political science department about Vietnam. I read to him the North Vietnamese statement for the secretive takeover of the entire country. And I asked him whether that was so bad that American lives should be involved. And he interrupted me saying, that was absolute tyranny. We should all be proud to give our lives to fight against it. And I then told him that what I had read was the US pacification program. Later, I found out that the benefactor of the graduate college in which I was teaching had complained to the dean about a letter he had seen in the New York Times. He said that faculty should not speak in areas outside of their expertise and should certainly not be associated with a radical newspaper like the New York Times. At the University of California, My young family had no relatives in town. People in California were friendly, but deeper relationship did not just happen from neighbors or the workplace. So we created an intentional family. 5 couples and their children promised to get together at least once a month to be able to ask for favors and to be able to refuse them. What came of this was a temporary set of bonds that worked wonderfully, particularly for my children. So I decided to set up a consultation service for people who wanted to develop intentional supports. But I did not want to charge for this. So I decided to go for a grant. And doing the background research, I came up with the amazing epidemiological finding. If you ask not what kind of illness or health breakdown the person has, but ask instead what kind of person has the illness, we find a remarkable circumstance. No matter whether your malady is cancer, a stomach condition, a heart-related condition, depression, anxiety, or the result of traffic accidents, those people who have a continuing network of support are in the low-risk category. Those people who do not have a strong network, who do have a strong network, move into the high-risk category following a disruption or a major loss. So this brought me to a fascinating question. How does the immune system know that you are loved? So this took away a portion of my professional life working on this, and I wrote a book on it. One conclusion being that how important caring is, and how it is consistently lacking in a society in which individual success and marketability are dominant motivators. I retired early from the University of California to be more available as a caregiver for my wife, who was dealing with worsening multiple sclerosis. I discovered Saybrook in 1994, where I could work mostly from home and could bring my wife to participate in several RC events. The Saybrook community was an open and receptive place to teach existing courses in humanistic psychology and human sciences. The school was also friendly to innovation, so I had a chance to develop courses in conflict resolution, violence and nonviolence, family therapy, relationships in health and healing, ecological psychology, community intervention skills, sustainability, community health and development, and the one that I still teach on globalization and power. It certainly shows you that I had a inadequate identification with any discipline. I just went where the problems were that interested me. The courses permitted me to pass on ideas from people who have inspired me and been mentors through a lifetime of combined teaching, research, and social activism. I've had some achievements and some disillusionments. One lesson I have drawn from the academic study of psychology is that the intriguing concepts we use to describe persons and behavior are often repetitions of old concepts with new labels. Also, we tend to make the mistake of believing that these concepts really make us masters of knowledge about people. Yet as we examine indigenous and particularly matriarchal insights, we learn that we psychologists are often lacking in hubris. There is so much more to be learned from hearing the stories of people and from examining them as part of their place in a social structure and in an ecological habitat. I work with a handicap. I've looked carefully under the rock at the taboo topic of power. I studied the institutions that mandate destruction, even while claiming a humanistic cause. After years of research with game theory, I produced evidence that a particular pattern of conciliatory moves, unilaterally by one party, could turn a conflict with deep distrust into one with a mutually beneficial outcome. Unfortunately, this knowledge was never applied to the arms race. Why? Because those with the greatest power to make decisions had a stake in maintaining the dangerous game. That group, with unbelievable wealth and extraordinary power, are real people whose money has earned them control over the boards of health institutions, of private and public universities. Governments have grown dependent upon their contributions to stay in power. And most important, they own the major resources of media information that tell us what we can think while they keep themselves from view. This system of oligarchy is not new. Reading from a Major General Smedley D. Butler, who wrote this in 1930s, quotes, "I spent 33 years and 4 months in active military service. And during that period, I spent most of my time as a high-class muscle man for big business, for Wall Street and the bankers. In short, I was a racketeer, a gangster for capitalism. I helped make Mexico, and especially Tampico, safe for American oil interests in 1914. I helped make Haiti and Cuba a decent place for the National City Bank boys to collect revenue in. I helped in the raping of a half a dozen Central American republics for the benefit of Wall Street. I helped purify Nicaragua for the international banking house of Brown Brothers from 1902 to 1912. I brought light to the Dominican Republic for the American sugar interests in 1916. I helped make Honduras right for the American fruit companies in 1903. In China, in 1927, I helped to see to it that Standard Oil went on its way unmolested. Looking back on it, I might have given Al Capone a few hints. The best he could do was to operate his racket in 3 districts. I operated in 3 continents. Today, the United States maintains approximately 800 military bases in 70 countries. We spend more than the next 7 military powers combined. When including the portion of the national debt that comes from war, 54% of U.S. discretionary budget goes into the military. Its function? To protect the power elite from the outrage of those who have been displaced. In the face of knowledge of what must be done immediately to save our environment, we are told that the steps needed are not economically feasible. What? The evidence is in. Austerity kills people. My mentor, economist Kenneth Boulding, once cautioned that anyone believing that infinite growth could occur in a finite planet must either be insane or an economist. Do we have to accept floods, droughts, uncontrollable fires, pesticide-contaminated food, the extinction of living species, contaminated water and air, because a small number of us would be inconvenienced by the loss and growth of their profits, rather than change the economic system to one that values life? We know clearly that families and communities provide the meaning and values that define our existence. Yet we are told that the trauma of disrupting and separating families is the price to be paid for our own success. We're told by our media gurus the meaning of life comes from ever-changing gadgets that we can consume. We're told that education is the route to security, without questioning that debt for students of modest incomes is steady income for the wealthiest, many of whom pay no taxes. Are we missing something when we fail to study how this way of funding education has been a way in which people with modest incomes are financing the wealthiest tycoons of the financial sector? Our education instills the value that creativity and innovation will produce something good, but without raising the question of what ends they actually produce. More often than not, the ends serve to diminish the very voices that we need to hear if we are to survive. We now here geographically are in Ohlone country. The indigenous Miwok, Castellan, other inhabitants lived through endless centuries in harmony with one another and as integral parts of the wonderful natural environment. Further south, the indigenous Maya people lived successfully since 2000 BC until the arrival of the conquistadors, who taught them how to fear God and the sword and to live in servitude. The US and governments it has installed have created a caste system with an elite buoyed up by transnational agriculture and mining industries and protected when necessary by the Marines. The US intervention model failed in Guatemala. It used the nation rich in natural resources and in cultural tradition as a tool for extractive resources and for cheap labor. It relied upon coercion to resist dissent over the failure to provide either decent livelihood or safety for most of its people. Despite dehumanizing efforts to turn away immigrants, Guatemalan families have no choice but to face the hazards of migration, to find hope within the wealthy country that has devastated their own. Details differ, but the general problem is repeated in Honduras, in El Salvador, Somalia, much of Central Africa. It recurs in Puerto Rico, in Pine Ridge, South Dakota, and in Detroit. People will continue to flee until there is a reparation for the lives that have been traumatized, until their contaminated lands are replenished, and until the devastating economies and military strongmen who run them, with US assistance, are replaced. The meta problem reflects a global question about sustainable values. How long can we continue a system that allows the exploitation of people and habitats, torments dissenters, walls off the displaced from our view, all so that a few among us may prosper? I think this upset somebody. Can we learn from the Maya wisdom that people and habitat have sacred status, and that robbing the habitat and pushing displaced people behind barriers does not work? It did not work to prevent the courageous resistance of Gandhi in India or Mandela in South Africa. It is being resisted by courageous efforts of groups like the Center for Creative Nonviolence, providing a lifeline for Yemeni communities being destroyed by American-made weapons provided to a brutal Saudi monarchy. Closer to home, Scott Warren, working with the group No More Deaths, faces 20 years in prison for providing water and food drops to refugees who are dying as they try to escape through the hottest and most arid deserts of the United States and Arizona. People are taking similar risks to provide sanctuary for the displaced people of the world and to save endangered species. Courage comes in refusing to be a bystander toward injustice anywhere. For me, I live in a world